and I fit in the boxes. Stop it, quitting was never an option. Exhausted, this passion is never exhausted. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it. Quitting was never an option. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it.
Today we have Timothy Hogan. He is a distinguished author and lecturer within the Western Mystery School tradition, renowned for its deep knowledge and contributions to spiritual and esoteric studies. A past master in several spiritual traditions, he holds a leadership role in numerous Masonic bodies and Rosicrucian lineages. As a Grand Master of multiple Knights Templar lineages, he also oversees the Templar Collegia, an organization dedicated to the preservation and teaching of Templar wisdom. Timothy has delivered lectures across the globe in both public and private venues, including guest appearances at universities, U.S. embassies, and various international platforms. His expertise has been featured on numerous television programs, podcasts, and radio interviews worldwide. As a prolific author, Timothy Hogan has penned several notable works, including The Alchemical Keys to the Masonic Ritual, The 32 Secret Paths of Solomon, Revelation of the Holy Grail, and Entering the Chain of the Union. This is incredible work that he's done and allowed him to become a best-selling author. Additionally, his articles have appeared in prominent periodicals such as El Initiation and Ariande's Web, Livingstone's Magazine, the New Equinox Journal, the Fraternal Review, the Scottish Rite Journal, and Herodom. Timothy is also known for his involvement in Track 2 diplomatic meetings, engaging with governmental and spiritual leaders to foster dialogue and understanding. And on screen, he is a host of Gaia's Mysteries of the Knights Templar series and a featured expert on Ancient Civilizations Season 6. Timothy Hogan's work continues to inspire and enlighten seekers of spiritual and esoteric wisdom worldwide. All right. It's Billy Carson here, aka 4biddenknowledge, and I have my great friend Timothy Hogan. Welcome to the show, Timothy.
Great to see you, Billy. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Listen, it's an honor, and this is long overdue to have you on the Forbidden Knowledge podcast. So I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time and get your insights on these amazing topics that we're going to talk about tonight. So thank you for spending the time.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, I really appreciate everything that you're putting out there, and just the fact to be able to contribute to it in any way is a great honor.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
So today we're going to dive into the topic of 33rd degree masonry or masonry in general. We're going to dive into the Knights Templar, and we'll dive into some of the Emerald Tablets as well. I think there's a lot of questions out there that people have on top of their head. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories regarding Freemasonry. And so I really want to dispel some of those false conspiracies or those false theories or ideas of Freemasonry and expose what Freemasonry is, good or bad, light or dark, whatever it is. I don't know all of it. I've read some books over time, but I have never been a Freemason and got into Freemasonry, but you have. And so can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into Freemasonry?
Sure. I started out actually as a young child, as early as 8. I'd been initiated into a tradition that had been started by Freemasons and Templars, and I didn't really know what it was at the time, but it was designed to build moral character and values, good values, become an upright citizen in the world. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I started looking into it more, like, where is this coming from? And I figured out that it was had this strong Masonic connection. And I remember at the time I decided, well, maybe, I want to check out Freemasonry. I want to see if there's something to this. And I was planning on going down to the local lodge, the only one I knew of that was nearby, to like meet them and see what that was about. And I remember I was in college at the time, and I was doing laundry at my mom's house. And I said, "Hey, Mom, do you know anything about Freemasonry?" And she's like, "Yeah, you're both sides of your family are super involved in it." I was like, "What?" I had no clue. Nobody had ever talked about it. Nobody had pushed me towards anything. And I found out that my father had been involved in D-Malay, which was a youth organization of Freemasonry, named after Jacques de Molay, who was the Grand Master of the Templars, who was burnt at the stake in 1314. And then my grandfathers on both sides of my family had been involved, and my great grandfathers, and so on, going all the way back to General Joseph Warren, who was really the father of the American Revolutionary War. And he had initiated Paul Revere into Freemasonry, and he was one of the first. His brother, actually, John Warren, was the first Grand Master of Masons in the forming United States. So I ended up having this really long history of it, and so I got involved in it. So that's kind of my background. Since then, I was initiated through all the degrees, and including in several what are referred to as appendant bodies, and I'm a past master of my personal lodge. I served 2 times as a master, and I'd also served as Master Kadosh in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, where the higher degrees are. So yeah, I have a lot of experience in it.
Wow, I see. So I got the right guy, okay? Because this is going to be an important podcast. So many times I've seen people comment on my post if I'm giving mathematical calculations based on the structure of a pyramid or a temple or alignments with stars, and it seems like I know all this information. So they'll comment, this guy's a Freemason, but not in a positive way. They comment in a negative way, as if it's something wrong with Freemasonry or Masonry. I've had people ask me, "Are you in the Freemasonry? Are you a Freemason?" Or sometimes I see posts from things like when Trayvon Martin, unfortunately, was killed here in Florida by Zimmerman, that his father was a Freemason and his body was a sacrifice, and all these things. So can you dispel some of this, or is it real?
Sure.
What is it that's making people think Freemasonry is dark and evil versus I've known you now for some years and you don't seem like that at all?
No. Well, I'll tell you, Freemasonry does have some strange rituals. And one of them in particular, the 3rd degree, is largely about you go through a symbolic death and then they raise you back to life. And
Okay.
it's from the old. It actually goes back to the old rites of Osiris in Egypt. Where the candidate, who was usually a priest in Egypt, or a pharaoh. I mean, the pharaoh had to go through it, where he went through a symbolic death and was raised again. But the purpose of the ceremony is for the person to have an out-of-body experience. And the conditions are such that if it's performed right, the candidate will have an out-of-body experience. And once they have that out-of-body experience, they no longer fear death, because they know there's more to them than just their physical body, right? And so once you no longer fear death, you're no longer afraid to go out there and say what needs to be said. I mean, the powers, the archonic forces out there, and powers that want to keep people enslaved, can't keep that person enslaved anymore. It's like Neo in the Matrix,
Gotcha.
So as a result, what happens is many Freemasons end up becoming leaders, of several different things. I mean, and because of that, there's kind of a stereotype like, oh, well, they're the ones controlling everything. And really, that's not the case. It's just that, a few good Masons break through every once in a while and get into power positions, but it's only because they're no longer fearing death. And that's really one of the great secrets of Freemasonry. Now, since it's been around for hundreds of years, that's as an institution, that's also allowed them to, start to build money up and capital, as a lodge, and form prominent positions, usually in any town in the United States or any major city, you're going to find Masonic lodges, and it's just because they've had the time to build up and start to build capital collectively and buy buildings and try to be a force of good in society. I mean, Freemasonry, most people don't know this, but that Freemasonry contributes anywhere between $2 and $3 million a day in charity for this country. And they don't brag about it. They don't talk about it, because it's true charity. They're not trying to be like, oh, look at me giving charity, but they're just trying to help communities, and it goes anywhere from going towards hospitals to take care of children to just protecting the widow and orphan, of in the community, who may need help, and so that's one of the great secrets of Freemasonry too. But that said, I will say, when I went to join Freemasonry, I asked my grandfather about it, because he was very actively involved, and he said to me, he said, Tim, I'll tell you this, there are good Masons, and unfortunately there are a few bad Masons. But if everybody lived by the tenets of Freemasonry, then all people would be good people. And I've held that true. I mean, I've never seen anything in Freemasonry that was nefarious or conspiratorial or bad. It may be that there have been a few people, though, who've gone through the Masonic system and because of their own. For example, a controversial figure in Freemasonry is Andrew Jackson. He was a guy who was a past Grand Master of Freemasonry in Tennessee. And on the one hand, he helped win the War of 1812, against the British.
Right.
He helped set up the Navy. He did all kinds of great things like that. But on the other hand, he was also responsible for the Trail of Tears, which was certainly not great, So, and part of that was just the politics of the day, that he had to be involved in. I will say, if the only conspiracy that I can absolutely verify that used to exist in this country, in particular in the United States, is that it used to be that you couldn't form a state, like the federal government wouldn't allow a territory to become a state unless there was a Masonic Grand Lodge in that territory. And the only reason for that was because Freemasonry teaches civil order. It teaches how to structure government. It's really set up so that if we were to have a massive cataclysm like we've had in ages in the past, if you've gone through the degrees of Freemasonry, you're given all of the keys to rebuild civilization.
Gotcha.
So if you're in a territory that's kind of wild, if there's a Masonic Grand Lodge in that territory, they at least knew that there was civility and stability and order enough for there to be a Grand Lodge in that territory. So, so pretty much every state in the United States, like I live in Colorado, our Grand Lodge was established in 1765, but we didn't actually become a state until 1865, but we didn't actually become a state until 1876. You know, so and the first Grand Master of Freemasonry in the territory of Colorado ended up becoming the first governor of the new state of Colorado. So that's pretty common. You find that all throughout. But
wow. So like a stabilizing force in different regions of the country, which then allowed them to become collected into the collective of states, basically. Because it seemed as if they had stabilized, organized enough, and had enough of a system in place to where they say, okay, we're confident now that this area can be considered part of the United States.
Yeah, and you find that stabilizing influence throughout the world. I mean, a good example of this is most people don't know, but Monrovia, which has had some problems over the years, but it was established as a country by Freemasons here in the United States, and it was specifically for African Americans in the United States who wanted to go back to Africa and have a stable region. So the particular Prince Hall Freemasonry set up Monrovia as a country for people to go back to. And even in recent years, when there's been conflict in that country and from the two sides bombing each other over there, the one place that neither side will bomb is the Masonic Grand Lodge, because that's what set up the country. And so when people need safety, that's where they go to. They go to the Grand Lodge because they know they won't be bombed there. So that stability exists across the country or across the world. I mean, Freemasonry does absolutely believe in freedom and, you know, freedom of thought, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. You know, the freedoms that we find in our Bill of Rights here in the United States is something that 100% Freemasonry believes in. You have to be, it has to be of your own free will in accord to even become a Freemason. So, so Freemasonry has fought for those freedoms for other people all throughout the world, and this is really why. If you were to say, I guess, another conspiracy, I mean, if you go to like all the Latin American countries that were helped to be set up by Freemasons like Simon Bolivar and others, you know, they were trying to provide freedom, particular freedom from the Roman Catholic Church at the time that was controlling those countries. So, yeah, so Freemasonry has been involved in that, but so anyone who thinks that Freemasonry exists to try to enslave them is nuts, because Freemasonry has always fought for freedom for the people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you said that, not just coming from my mouth, coming from someone who actually is a Freemason and, somebody that I know and respect, and that's on the inside and been doing it for a very long time. So there you have it, folks. You've heard it directly from an actual Freemason. And what level Freemason have you achieved?
Well, I'm what's known as a Knight Commander Court of Honor, which is, above the 32nd degree. And it means I'm basically leadership, within the system. But technically speaking, from a Masonic standpoint, even though we have all these higher degrees, I've probably received probably over 80 degrees, to be honest, from all the different Masonic bodies and everything else. But that said, Freemasons will say the highest degree in Freemasonry is the 3rd degree. And that all the other degrees are just supplemental education, and that they do go into developing moral character, but they also look at the mysteries of the ancient world. Everything from Egyptian mysteries to Vedic mysteries to Persian mysteries, the mysteries of Mithras, so on and so forth. So. And certainly Kabbalistic mysteries, alchemical mysteries, Gnostic mysteries. These are all things that Freemasonry looks at. But from a Masonic perspective, we say once you've received the 3rd degree, that's really the highest degree for everybody.
Yeah.
And we're all on the level. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And so when I see 33rd degree Mason, what does that mean?
So it means they've gone through this, what's known as the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which was largely developed it existed prior to Albert Pike. Albert Mackey was the one who really passed it on to Albert Pike. But Albert Pike's kind of considered the philosophical father of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. He's received some negative press recently. His statue was torn down, for example, in Washington D.C. He was a Southern general, but he was fighting. The reason why he was on the South was he believed in states' rights over federal control, and but because of that, he's been accused of being racist, even though he gave all the Scottish Rite degrees to Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is the African American branch of Freemasonry that was largely responsible for fighting the civil rights in this country. And he also fought for Indian rights at a time when other people weren't. I mean, in fact, he quit his job as a general because he was being asked to put our Native American Indian brothers on the front line so they could be cannon fodder, during the war, and he refused to do it, and he fought for their rights as a lawyer. He actually went through the bar as a lawyer with Abraham Lincoln, ironically. They both took the bar together. So, but he was kind of the philosophical father of Freemasonry. So there's the 32 degrees. So you receive the first 3 degrees at a lodge. There's thousands of lodges all over the world. And then once you receive the 3rd degree, you can go into the Scottish Rite. It's kind of like a collective body where different lodges join together and go through those higher degrees. Once you receive the 32nd degree, that's kind of like that's as high as most Scottish Rite Masons end up ever going. But then you can receive an honorary recognition, which is Knight Commander of the Court of Honor. And from there, you can receive this honorary 33rd degree. And that honorary 33rd degree is more, it basically, it represents that you've contributed a lot to Freemasonry into Scottish Rite in particular. Whether through your time and effort and helping out, or donating a lot of money to the organization to keep it going. It's not really. I don't think there's any grand secret that's going to change your life with it, but but they are kind of the leadership of the Scottish Rite. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so they've made a lot of contributions to the cause.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? One thing some of the books that I came across years ago dealing with Freemasonry, the fact that obviously some of the teachings seem to be metaphysical or Masonic, but also some of it seems to be dealing with the otherworldly life, like the moon and planets and space and other sentient beings could be in the universe. Was that information I read about accurate?
It is accurate. It's not overtly taught per se. I mean, but I'll give you an example. Just a couple examples that I can talk about. In the second degree of Freemasonry, one of the things that we're taught is that there are numberless worlds around us. And not saying numberless planets, saying numberless worlds, which implies civilizations on those planets when it's talking about what's out there. And this was largely a quote from the Hermetic philosopher Giordano Bruno, who was burnt at the stake by the Roman Church for saying this. But it is taught within the second degree of Freemasonry. Another example of this, which and by the way, all of the initial degrees of Freemasonry are really built around the teachings and the philosophy of Hermes, who of course is of Thoth or Tahuti of the Egyptians, and which you know very well. So, but that's what the degrees are based around. I mean, they have a character called Hiram, where each candidate represents Hiram, but Hiram is just if you take the Hebrew Hiram and you transliterate that into Greek, Hebrew doesn't have standard vowels, so Hiram is really just HRM, and if you transliterate that into Greek, it becomes Hermes, which is of course Hermes. So, so most that's one of the mysteries around the degrees of Freemasonry. But the third degree does have a ritual drama, particularly here in the United States, where there's some of the characters in the drama are trying to escape Jerusalem, and they're trying to do it through Solomon's ship. And so they encounter the ship captain, and of course he won't let them get on the ship because they don't have Solomon's pass. But what's really significant about this, and they're trying to escape to Ethiopia from Jerusalem on the ship that is heading from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. Well, you have to remember these degrees were put together in the 1700s. And in the 1700s, there was no way to sail a ship on water from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. The Suez Canal hadn't been built yet.
Right.
So, but what had been discovered at that time by Sir James Bruce, who was a member of the Scottish Royal Society, he was the first to publish an Ethiopian text known as the Kebra Nagast. And in this text, it talks about King Solomon's flying ship and how he used to fly from Jerusalem to Ethiopia to see his wife, the Queen of Sheba. Wow. And it would describe how he would fly there in a couple hours, which would take normal people by land, several days to traverse. So, and it would describe how he, what powered the ship and what allowed him to do this flying ship. Well, this is the ship that Freemasonry is talking about. It's talking about this flying ship, and that's been in the degrees since the 1700s. So
Wow.
it's you know, so that is all a part of it. You know, we look at it today and they're like, you know, it doesn't seem that crazy to be talking about UAPs anymore, especially since the government has opened up some. But when you consider this was in a degree from the 1700s, I mean, that was pretty extreme. So
yeah, it's pretty extreme. And you know, you just answered a big question for me. We're going to get into Thoth in a little bit after we get done talking a little bit more about Freemasonry and a little bit into the Templars. But the fact that he flew on this sky ship, like they call it in the Emerald Tablets, to get to the Queen of Sheba. In my book, Compendium of the Emerald Tablets, I talk about the list of incredible people that had access to the knowledge of the tablets, and which also inspired them to create a translation or inspired them to write books of their own. And the Queen of Sheba is one of them.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, talk about inspiration. I mean, to remember too, I mean, Freemasonry has specifically focused on the writings of Hermes or Thoth. I mean, that's, I would say, more than anything else in Freemasonry, that's what it focuses on. And it has inspired a number of, you know, most of the early astronauts, people like Buzz Aldrin and Gordon Cooper and others. They were all Freemasons.
Yep.
And it was, and many of the people who helped, not all the people. I mean, NASA's kind of controversial, especially when you factor in Operation Paperclip and the Nazis that were brought over to help get it make it power it. But
Werner von Braun,
many of the astronauts, exactly. But most of the astronauts were all Freemasons that you know, and they were attracted to it because of their Masonic backgrounds. So
gotcha.
So there's a connection there.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And so this is going to lead us actually into it a little bit more. So Freemasonry, and I'm glad you said it. Now, these are obviously questions, a lot of these questions I'm asking you, I kind of know the answer to, but I want people to hear it coming from an actual Freemason so that it doesn't look like, oh, Billy's just, you know, he just wants to sell us this information to make us believe that, you know, this is real information. Anybody in Freemasonry understands and knows this. This is how they're taught. And it is, a lot of it's based on the teachings of Hermes and the Hermetic principles, right?
That's exactly
and so let's
right.
go into
100%.
that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you this: if you ever get an opportunity to go into a Masonic lodge anywhere in the world, but particularly in this country, one of the first things you'll notice in the lodge room is 2 pillars with globes on them. There's a celestial globe on one, and there's a terrestrial globe on the other pillar. And people don't, you know, they may find it curious. It's said to represent the pillars that were in front of King Solomon's temple. But of course, the descriptions of the pillars in front of King Solomon's temple from the Bible just describe there being 2 spherical structures on the globes. It doesn't say anything about it doesn't even refer to them as globes. It just refers to them as these spheres that are on the top of the pillars. But within the Masonic system, you'll find a terrestrial globe and then also a celestial globe that shows the zodiac on it. And the reason for this is secretly in the ancient world, particularly in Greece, one of the names for a pillar was a herm. And it was called a herm because it was named after Hermes. And the reason why it was called a herm and named after Hermes is usually these pillars had on top of them something related to that Hermetic philosophy, the philosophy of Hermes or Thoth. And in this case, that's exactly what we see in the Masonic Lodge, because those globes literally represent as above, which is the celestial globe, so below, which is the terrestrial globe, right?
Yeah.
Which is a fundamental teachings of Hermes.
Yes.
So you'll find that in every Masonic lodge that you go in. You'll also find within the Masonic lodges, they have different officers, and each of the officers wear different collars with jewels on them, and but the messengers of the lodge, which is both the senior deacon and the junior deacon of a lodge, they carry rods, and the senior deacon has a rod with a sun on it, and the junior deacon has a rod with a moon on it. And or in some jurisdictions, they actually have depictions of Hermes himself on top of the rods. And this is because Hermes was the messenger of the gods, according to Greek tradition, just like these officers are the messengers within the Masonic Lodge. But more so, that sun and that moon come directly from Hermes' emerald tablet, not the emerald tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, but just the emerald tablet of Hermes. And where it says its father is the sun, its mother is the moon. And so that's again trying to be emphasized within the Masonic Lodge. And in fact, even the reason why they're called deacons is it comes from the Greek word dekanos, which means ruler of 10. And going all the way back to ancient Egypt, the dekanos were rulers of the 10-degree segments of the sky. Traditionally, there were 36 dekanos or deacons. Each were in charge of 10-degree segments of the sky, totaling 360 degrees total, because they were measuring the sky and how it related to the earth, which went directly back to what Thoth was talking about. And in fact, if you go to, I know you've seen this at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, when you go up and you see that zodiac that's on the ceiling, it has 36 deacons on it, because those are the rulers of the 10-degree segments of the sky. So these are all things that are preserved within the Masonic Lodge that relate directly to Thoth and go back to that ancient tradition. And it's just a way of preserving it for, again, I mean, if civilization were to collapse again, like it did during the Younger Dryas cataclysmic event, and civilization were to collapse, this is information that has to be preserved and known by people so that they can rebuild civilizations. So and
that's the key, because I was going to say, in the animal tablets of Thoth, that version, not the singular tablet of Hermes, but the multiple tablets, the beginning verses open up with him talking about rebuilding civilization, which is pretty much the standard understanding or purpose of the Masonic temples. That's
right. In fact, even the word temple itself comes from the word templum, which just means time. And the reason why it's called a temple is because temples were set up in relation to the stars, so that you could measure time based on the passage of stars. And so that's literally what temples were set up to do. Again, there's that as above, so below relationship. And of course, you find that's really great in Egypt, but you also find it in any true temple. I mean, they're aligned in certain ways to be in harmony with the stars. So, again, that's another science that Freemasonry studies, but it comes from Thoth. Really, it comes from Thoth or Hermes. It's the Hermetic science.
Exactly. Some people that I had talked to that were in Freemasonry years ago, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, they had told me that the Emerald Tablets they ended up in the Vatican archive. Now, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but that's what I've been told by a couple of Freemasons. What is your opinion on what happened to these Emerald Tablets?
I wouldn't doubt it. I've heard that rumor as well. There was one point in time, it's kind of switching gears a little bit, but not so much. I'm also a Templar, and I can tell you as early as I first became a Templar, and Templarism and Freemasonry are related, and we can talk about that. But I first became a Templar back in about 1996, and I could tell you that the study of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean were a fundamental part of our study system. The second year of study, that's all we studied. So that was, it's been that text has been an important text and continues to be an important text for us.
Yeah.
Now, where the original tablets went, I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say though that in my study of it, there were a number of Templars that were explorers of Central America and the Yucatan and the Mayan mysteries, including George Hunt Williamson and others. And there was a Mayan account. It was actually an account of I want to get this right, of a early Roman Catholic priest, conquistador, who was going over to the was in the areas of Colombia and all the way up into Mexico, and he describes coming across a leader, was almost a mythological leader that the Mayans were referring to, known as Wotan. And Wotan was said to have a series of jade tablets that described the exact same things that we find in the Emerald Tablets.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider Wotan, V and W are interchangeable in the Latin alphabet. So Wotan could also be Wotan. And Wotan in the Nordic tradition is Hermes in the Greek tradition.
That's correct.
So right there, we're literally talking about jade tablets of Hermes that were discovered in the Mayan area by this conquistador who was said to have turned them over to the Roman Church at the time. So I'm assuming those jade tablets were either replicas of the Emerald Tablets or they were the Emerald Tablets. And because the Emerald Tablets even talk about a connection with the Mayans, really. It's talking about them being buried not only in Egypt, but also in the Yucatan region. So I'm assuming this is what this priest found, this Roman Catholic conquistador priest. And if so, those would be in the Vatican archives to this day. So
makes a lot of sense to me. It was a conclusion that I had come to based on knowing about Wotan and the Nordic traditions and the translations. But then I had an opportunity, fortunately, to talk to a couple of Freemasons that I had met years ago down in Miami, And that was pretty much almost the same exact scenario that you just told me. So you just gave me a lot of confirmation, which is amazing.
It's great.
Independent confirmation. Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish I could remember the name of the conquistador. I did write about it. I have a book called Entering the Chain of Union, and I write about it in there, and I write about who that priest conquistador was, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
We'll look it up. Don't worry, we'll look it up, and we'll if we can find it, we'll add it into the clip here.
Great.
One thing I learned about these emerald tablets in reading them, they were so advanced, and I know some people want to try to debunk that. Oh, this was just from the 1900s. Okay, well, some of the science that's in the emerald tablets didn't get discovered by quantum physicists until the 1980s. So and beyond.
Yeah, how explain that? Right.
It's crazy.
It's true.
Even the spirituality that's in there. I think everything is connected to that spirituality from the emerald tablets as well.
Absolutely. They're very advanced for their time, and there's things that are in there that are also found in other manuscripts from the ancient world. In particular, there's a manuscript called the Thule manuscript that the Vatican had, which also talked about during the reign of Tutmosis III, these flying discs showing up, and how it caused the people to lose control of their bodies and fall on their bellies, and that it caused fish to come from the craft onto the people, which the Egyptians had never seen before. And so Pharaoh Tutmosis III, he ended up causing incense to be burned to Amun-Ra, and he said that after several days had passed over, multiple of these crafts had showed up, and he even describes how he was taken up in one of them, and he was shown the mysterious ways of the gods. But then when he came back down, he set up he established a new schools, the first new schools of Egypt, and they were all based around the teachings of Thoth. And in some of that you find resonance in emerald tablets of Thoth. So there's also a historical precedence for some of that information that we can read in the records, the Egyptian records. So that's really something.
And Thutmose III, I believe that was King Tut's grandfather.
It was, yeah.
He was married to Queen Taye. Yeah, King Tut's grandfather, Thutmose III, married to Queen Taye, and their son was Akhenaten.
That's exactly right. And his Tutmosis III's mother was Hatshepsut.
Yes,
and it's interesting. There's only a few pharaohs in Egypt, including Tutmosis III and Hatshepsut and Akhenaten, and a few others who in their titles they were listed as being masters of the Stargate, which is really interesting. I mean, and they to this day their temples still have depiction. In fact, that at Hatshepsut's temple, at the very top, in the middle, at the back, there's a chamber, and on the outside of it, it says it's a Stargate. It has the message for it, but that is guarded 24/7 to this day. I mean,
yes, it is.
And if the guard, if anyone gets in there, that guard ends up going to prison for life. So the Egyptian government still takes it very seriously.
Oh yeah, they do. They have the hieroglyphic symbol for the Stargate, and it's called the Saba, which means Stargate.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. Our good friend Mohammed Ibrahim's been tracking those down. So
yes, he has. Yeah, shout out to Muhammad Ibrahim. Yeah, he's an amazing human being. Him and his wife Noha, they do a great job, and we're really pleased with the services they provide and the partnership we have with them. Saba Tours, right? He's the Stargate tour guide, so he takes us to see all the Stargates.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, man. One of the things I learned too, dealing with the Emerald Tablets, was that it seems to be the fundamental basis for most spiritual teachings around the planet. There's so much in it that really resonates with all the things much later that became "quote unquote" religion. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, philosophically speaking, I mean, it's not just about advanced technologies being depicted in the ancient world, but it's also talking about really, it's anything from the laws of karma to just veneration of the sacred, and I believe it's all designed to get us in a state of attunement, so that we can actually, and this is just my personal take on it, but there are beings that are out there, and they do have advanced technologies, and that seem to be technological consciousness interference, or not interference, but they're able to use their technology to also tap into consciousness or connect with consciousness. And I believe that the Emerald Tablets are all designed to kind of prepare us for that, to prepare ourselves to be vessels to connect with these higher beings. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more consciousness technology interface, is what I mean. We'll be seeing a lot more of that in the future, not only from these craft that are out there and these beings that are out there, but I believe our own government is working really hard right now to try to develop that for themselves. And but the Emerald Tablets outlines all of that, and you find the fundamentals of that being spread throughout the religions around the world that have kind of come out of that.
Yeah, so, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. In my opinion, it's a real powerful teaching, and anyone that begins to really read them and try to discern them will realize it's all about understanding that you are to become the light of the world. You are to seek the light and become the light, and do good and help others, assist people, and use the power of your voice and learn how to walk in your power. I mean, philosophically, and to avoid the dark brothers. It talks about the dark brothers in there, and it tells you that the dark brothers will appear and what they'll do and how they operate from behind the scenes to bring turmoil and discord between the people. All the warnings are there. All the signs are there. And it's a great teaching.
One of the things I'm still waiting for is, they do describe a craft underneath the Sphinx. And I don't know if it's talking about an actual physical like UAP, or if it's just talking about a like an ark for preservation. But I do think that there is something under the Sphinx. I think there's a reason why the Egyptian government keeps it on lockdown. That they allow you to go up to the Sphinx, they allow you to walk around it, maybe if you're in a special group. But there's about 5 different entrances into the Sphinx that are all closed off, and they all go down to something. That's right. They all go down to something, and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean makes it clear that there's some sort of an ark or a craft of some kind underneath the Sphinx. So maybe that's to be seen soon.
Yeah. Well, I was doing a workshop at the Conscious Life Expo back in 2017, and I did a post-conference lecture, which I was doing a lecture on the Emerald Tablets, and I was talking about this exact thing, the Great Sphinx, and that the fact that Thoth had claimed there was something underneath the Sphinx's paw. Also, we know the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce had predicted that as well, prophesied that as well. And in the audience was a producer who had produced a show that was going to be aired on the Discovery Channel. And I remember seeing the commercials for it. They were going to show live what the scans revealed beneath the Sphinx's paw. And this is, you know, at the time where all these streaming TV and all that stuff didn't exist. So you had to be there to watch the TV guide. You had to go to the TV guide. If you missed it, you missed it. I'm sitting there waiting. And then all of a sudden the screen goes black and says, this show has been, what did it say? It has been not disconnected, but it had, what the term they used was, but they basically said this show is not airing tonight. And then they went to a commercial break and they brought some other rinky-dink show on. But the gentleman in the audience said he was a producer for that. He gave me his business card and everything. And he said they discovered something amazing underneath the Sphinx. They were slapped with a gag order. They can't talk about it. And he believes that the military, because there's tunnels under there, had come in through a connecting tunnel. His personal opinion, he says now, is that they came in and started to access that area, and maybe whatever was down there might be removed through those tunnels. But he said that's just a hypothesis. It could still be there, but we saw something massive about a mile deep. So I believe that there's something down there. I think that the Emerald Tablets are correct. I mean, so Thoth even predicted something, a Hall of Records inside the Great Pyramid above the Grand Gallery, and they discovered that with a muon scan a few years ago. This open chamber, a huge area right above the Grand Gallery. That's right. So I mean, it just the revealing just keeps coming and showing and proving that these Emerald Tablets, to me, are very accurate. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, historically, what is the Knights Templar and what's their purpose?
Sure. So I'm a Grand Master of one of the Templar lineages, and the Templar Order was originally founded. Most historians will say it was founded in 1118. It was actually started much earlier than that in 1096, but it was set up when the Crusades got started. There was a fear that the Crusaders were going to go down and come across artifacts and other things, and they wouldn't understand what it was, and they would get destroyed, basically. So the Templar Order was set up to go down and try to retrieve these artifacts before the rest of the Crusaders got them. This was actually their secret mission. So the Templars, there were a number of people that came out of different Gnostic traditions in southern France. They ended up forming the first Templars. And it was said that their job was to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. Well, there were only 8 of them, 8 Templars that were started out. So that would have been impossible. But what they really did is they went down and they were doing digging. They were doing archaeological work in Jerusalem in particular. And they found a number of different artifacts there. But then what they discovered in Jerusalem actually led them to Egypt. And so they went to Egypt and they set up their commandery building at the Temple of Isis at Philae. And this is really why they brought back, the image of Isis and Horus that's found at the Temple of Isis at Philae ended up becoming the symbol of Mary and Jesus in the cathedrals in Europe that the Templars were also starting to build. So the Templars, they saw what the Egyptians were doing. They saw they recovered a number of different artifacts, including multiple arks, like the Ark of the Covenant, but they encountered multiple arks, recovered multiple arks. They realized that these were what we would call today a capacitor, but they were a technology from ancient pre-Egyptian civilization. The Egyptians found these things and were preserving them for a long time. The first ark that the Templars recovered was at Temple of Seti the First at Abydos.
Mm.
In fact, there's a chamber at the Temple of Seti the First at Abydos that is closed to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get a chance to go in there, it actually depicts several arcs being undergoing transportation by the Egyptians,
Mm-hmm.
and it has Templar graffiti from the 1200s of 3 red crosses surrounding one of the arcs, because that was where they actually found the first ark in Egypt, and then they ended up finding 5 other ones, which are still in Templar possession. But the Templars actually ended up when they got suppressed in 1307 by the Roman Church. They were suppressed because they were finding all of these texts, like Gnostic texts and other apocryphal texts that didn't fit with the standard Bible, and they were finding other artifacts like these arcs and other things, and they weren't turning them over to the Roman Church, and they were setting up relationships with groups that were outside of the Roman Church control. Other religions, other philosophies. They set up good relationships with Islamic scholars and Druze scholars and Jewish scholars, and they were gaining all this knowledge, and so the Roman Church suppressed them and said you can't be doing this, because they'd also set up the first multinational corporation. They set up the banking system, that could transcend any one country, because they were trying to break down the control of the monarchies and the Roman Church at the time that controlled everything. So the way to do that was through money, setting up your own financial systems and everything else. So the Templars were doing all this, but eventually they got suppressed for it. The Grand Master got burnt at the stake, and the Templar Order had to go underground. And when it went underground, it had to move all these artifacts over to the New World of the Americas, which they knew existed, both from Egyptian records and from Jewish records and from Viking records, all of which they were having they had associations with. So they moved these artifacts over to the New World, and they had to go underground, and they had to form new bodies to exist in. And so one of the bodies that they created, since they were already building the cathedrals, they disguised themselves as stonemasons. And these stonemasons ended up later forming Freemasonry. So Freemasonry really came out of the Templar tradition. And this is why in the higher degrees of Freemasonry, they have Templar degrees. All of the different bodies of rites of Freemasonry, all in their higher degrees, are Templar based. It's because that's where Freemasonry came out of. But there are other Templar lineages that have just continued to exist even after they got suppressed in 1307. They prepared themselves, and they just existed in other territories where they wouldn't get suppressed, like in Portugal and Scotland and in other places. So that's really kind of the relationship between Freemasonry and Templarism. Templars, the Templar lineage I represent, is much more. We don't beat around the bush about what our tradition is and where we came from. Freemasonry, they kind of gradually reveal it to you. So,
yeah, that's incredible and powerful. How many incredible artifacts? I mean, where do you think a lot of these artifacts and a lot of this information and knowledge and ancient texts and books they were able to preserve, where do you think a lot of them are now?
Well, I can tell you where they are. They're in 2 different vaults that we have. We used to have 7 vaults and one of them was actually at Oak Island, but we removed most everything out of Oak Island in 1765. So they're not going to find much there. I hate to tell the people on the show who've been digging for so long. I mean, we have told them, but they're making money off of a show. So
I know they've been digging on Oak Island for decades, decades and decades, digging on Oak Island.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. They may find a few coins and stuff, but most of the stuff has already been moved out of there, and it was moved out, to be honest, to a lot of the gold. We had gold candelabras and gold jewelry and coins, and a lot of that stuff was all went towards funding the American Revolution, actually. And that's why that stuff was removed in 1765. But that said, and Benjamin Franklin was actually largely involved in that process. But that said, we still have 2 vaults right now. They're both on private property that still contains some pretty fantastic things in them, including 6 arcs. And one of the other things we have too that's controversial is clear back in the Middle Ages, we discovered this tomb in East Jerusalem where we discovered these ossuaries, which are boxes that hold bones. And these ossuaries had on them the names of people like Yeshua, Mary of Magdal, Jan, and what we figured out was that these could likely be the bones of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and John the Baptist, and their kids. And when I say their kids, Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist first, it appears, and they had children. And then when he was killed, she, as per tradition, she ended up marrying his cousin, who was second in command, which was the person we now know as Jesus. And then they had kids. And eventually, they went off and to the world, but they ended up getting buried together back at the family tomb in Jerusalem, which we now know as the Talpiot tomb. And this tomb was again rediscovered back in the 80s. They found the boxes, the ossuary boxes, but they never found the bones that were in them. And that's because we took the bones out of it back during the Crusades. And these are now in the vaults here in the Americas. We hope to open these boxes soon, or these tombs, these vaults soon, at least one of them, because it's time for it. We now have the technology where we can instantly make this available, and people's minds aren't as conditioned as they used to be, so they're a little more open to this possibility. And we're not trying to invalidate anybody's faith. We're just trying to say there's a little more to it, but it also implies, a shift in perspective. Like we believe 100% based off of the not only the texts we discovered, but what we'd encountered in the tomb, that these were people who 100% believed in reincarnation, right? And they believed that they died and then they came back. You come back, and being born again was just that. And it wasn't just accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. It was literally being born again. And so that's going to be a shift for a lot of Christians to wrap their heads around. And
I was saying the good news is they can't burn you in this time and age, but all they can do is just try to make some hate online. That's the worst they can actually do to you. So I love the information. This is incredible information.
Yeah.
It's a lot of confirmation for me for a lot of information that I've known for a long time and believed for a long time. It's good to hear it from somebody else. And that if they can, those vaults, it is now about the right time to start dispensing some of the information to the people, because I think the majority of people are ready. A lot of the people are putting away the dogma and the ideologies and are ready and open for new information to come forward. And maybe you can't release it all at once, but maybe just a little bit at a time, to wake people up to a much bigger story, a more broad-ranging story about our past history, not just religiously, but anything else that you guys have been able to acquire, your Templars have been able to acquire and save for prosperity over time. I think that would be absolutely amazing, so just mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to be a shift of perception. It's like you've talked about, and I've talked about the fact that the Egyptians had, and in the ancient world, they had all of these arcs. They had multiple arcs. I mean, you go to any temple in Egypt, they have depicted on the temple walls these arcs that they had. Mm-hmm. So to you and I, the idea of multiple arcs isn't even an issue, because we've seen for ourselves on the temple walls, these are being depicted. But to most people, they only think of one arc, the Ark of the Covenant. So it's just going to be a shift of perception for people. But I think, we need to stand for truth, and we need to, the way things have been being sold for the last 2,000 years, has really, while maybe there's been some charity that's come out of it, which I always value, but there's also been a lot of destruction on this planet, and a lot of using biblical passages to pit people against each other and to enslave each other. And, we need to get past all that. And the true teachings that we believe are there paints a very different picture about our oneness and how we need to work together, and our destiny, even beyond this world, and how we were put here to be gardeners to attend this world. I mean, I kind of look at this planet as almost, this is Eden, and all the animals that are here, for all we know, they could have all been, most of them could have been brought here from other planets to preserve it as a sanctuary here. And we were put in charge to be in charge of all that and to protect it. And we're doing a horrible job at that. And if we can't do that, then I'm sure that there are powers greater than us out there that will find, other people to do that for us, So, we have a place here, but we also have a place in the stars, and the teachings all point to this, and the writings of Thoth the Atlantean point to this. And I'm just thankful that people like yourself are trying to make people aware of it. Wake people up, because that's really what it's about. It's all about us waking up. Yeah, absolutely. It's about waking up, enlightening, being of service to others, and loving and caring for your brother and sister at the end of the day. And all this bickering and fighting and backstabbing and clout chasing, all this stuff just has to come to an end. And it will come to an end, because we can't get into a golden age with that dirt tagging along with us. So that will have to fall away to the wayside. Those egos will drop and fall. The divide and conquer tactics will drop and fall away. And the real humanity will appear. And that more mature version of humanity will make it to the next golden age. And maybe, just maybe this time, we'll sustain it and we won't fall again. That's the ultimate goal, I believe, in our mission on this planet. So it was incredible having you here today, man. You're just a wealth of knowledge. Can you tell people about your books, your websites, or how they can find you? So it's good having you here today, Timothy. It's an amazing day. Great information, great knowledge you dispensed. We have to do this again and bring more knowledge to the people. But for now, unfortunately, we have to bring this podcast to an end, but we got to have you back again. So tell everyone about your books, your website, and where they can find you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Billy. I really appreciate being able to do this with you. and I'm just excited about the future and what we can continue to do to bring forward to the people and to work together in doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can people find you online?
Oh, well, I can be found on Instagram. I can also be found on Facebook and X and on YouTube as well. Just Google Timothy Hogan. Oh, and as well as on Amazon. I have several books I've written, so covering a lot of these topics that we're talking about today. But you can find me on Amazon. Just Google Timothy Hogan, you'll find me.
Beautiful. And we'll make sure it's all linked underneath the video and also the audio as well. So thank you again, my friend. It was an honor talking to you today. Watch this video for free at www.4bk.tv or download the app on your smartphone, Fire Stick app, Samsung TV, Roku, and other app providers.